Tet McMillan, is he a no-brainer if he falls to 25? The answer may surprise you. We got to dive into that. Plus, Cam Skattebo, when does it make sense? And when is opportunity going to present itself for the Texans? Let's go.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the Locker Room on YouTube. You know what it is. Let's get it. Hey, Locker Room. Yeah, we in the locker room. Texas talk, yeah, you know what we about to do. Localize, every angle's what we really do. We the source, we the pulse of the city too. Landlocked, got the game in the headlock. Localize every time, can't stop, won't stop.
It is the Locker Room, number one source for Texans digital content. We are right in the middle of March Madness. I got my YouTube TV fired up. I got the dual screen going. We got a little Cougs action. We got a little Auburn action. Maybe you got some action and you're trying to get in these games. I got to tell you, it's been a interesting gambling day for me, to say the very least. And I definitely got some action on these games. So it is March Madness, and we will keep a close eye on that. But we're here to talk about the draft. We're here to talk about the Texans. 4 weeks away from the draft. At this time in 4 weeks, we will be reacting to round two and three of the NFL draft. And round one will be in the rear view. And round one right now is becoming an incredibly polarizing time, as it always is, pertaining to the Houston Texans. And right now, the most polarizing guy that I've come across, initially it was Emeka Egbuka. It seems like he's kind of shifted to where now he's probably looked at as kind of the safest pick and the most popular pick. And now McMillan is a name that is beginning to emerge. Could you potentially trade up for McMillan? Could he potentially fall to you? What happens if the Texans have the opportunity to get McMillan? And are there some clues perhaps that maybe the Texans wouldn't like McMillan? The answer is yes. The answer is yes. Now, does that mean it's a 100% certainty? No, but the answer is yes. As someone who has heard every word D'Amico Ryans has said, been feet away from him, starting last year at press conferences, I do think it's a question worth asking as to whether or not McMillan fits into what D'Amico preaches and what perhaps he may practice if the opportunity does present itself. We also have an update on one of the most popular prospects in the draft that we'll get into. When would he make sense? And we're going to break down the opportunities for the Texans and the moments that we should probably look at very closely when the first round begins. But let's start with the McMillan thing. First of all, the question is, how does Tet McMillan become a Texan? Does he fall to the Texans? Do the Texans trade up for him? How does that opportunity present itself? I talked to John Harris today, and he's going to join us on the stream on the SNL. And he said that if McMillan falls to the Texans, run the pick up, draft him at pick 25. That's a guy who watches all the tape. That's one of the guys that I respect the most when it comes to the draft opinion. That's John Harris's opinion. I've heard a lot of people say that. I've heard people in Dallas say, we got to take him at 12. We need a wide receiver. Let's put him opposite of CeeDee Lamb. Let CeeDee Lamb do work in the slot. We got to get him at 12. Some people say he's the best wide receiver. Some people say Matthew Golden is the best receiver. Steve Smith was a little bit critical of McMillan, but he also has him as his second wide receiver. So how critical is he really being? He's talked about kind of perhaps him lacking that dog. We came across this, and Mr. Optimistic on Twitter tagged me in it. God, it created a lot of it dragged me into some weird conversations. But this was something that McMillan said. Keep in mind, this is his own YouTube, and he was talking about watching tape, and this was what he said. This was from SNL. couple days ago. Notice the suits, little buy or sell. But this was McMillan.
Well, you know what?
And it's from whatever the hell that is, YouTube. You can read it. STUINTHESTU on YouTube. But this was something that he said that some people are reacting to. Maybe it's the cabin fever portion of the draft, but this is what McMillan said.
Don't watch football at all.
At all.
Is it hard to watch film then if you don't like watching football?
Yeah.
For real? That's crazy.
I don't like watching film either. I don't ever need to watch it by myself because we go over as a receiver group.
All right, so he doesn't like watching football, doesn't like watching film. And obviously, tongue-in-cheek, we said we were out. I do wonder how much of a thing that is. And this is actually a discussion that I've had with Seth Payne before. I think I've had it with John Harris before. I don't know that it's the biggest deal. And quite frankly, these kids aren't finished products. Like a lot of these guys are teenagers, you know? So you can develop into someone who maybe likes film. So maybe that doesn't really matter. Here's my thing though. I don't watch football. I don't like watching film. What do you think the Texans would think about that? Because I've been in front of D'Amico Ryans, and let's pretend he just doesn't really like football and doesn't like film. Let's pretend that he's actually being serious there. And I mean, it's his own YouTube. He's talking to his guy. It didn't seem like it was like a real joke or anything like that. But let's pretend that is the case. I've heard D'Amico Ryans say at least 50 times, we want guys that love football. We want guys that want to swarm. We want all that. So when I hear D'Amico Ryans say that, does that mean that he looks past something like that? Does that mean that it ends up not being a big deal? It's just kind of a joke and it's changed. I don't know. It does feel like D'Amico Ryans likes guys that like football. Herman on the super chat. You ain't never hate.
Swarm.
When people tell you who they are, believe them. Yeah, but I mean, you're not always who you are in college. Whenever you say that. But here's the other thing that I think should be taken into account when it comes to the possibility of McMillan. If the Texans trade up somewhere, and we'll get over we'll get into like the best opportunities and the best spots to perhaps trade up. But when if the Texans trade up, and Brian says he's joking, but if they do trade up, then okay, you're going to get McMillan. Good for y'all. Y'all thought he warranted being aggressive. Y'all feel like he's going to pair with Nico Collins. Okay. So they have the extra draft equity, they have the assets, and they decide to trade up. Cool. I keep hearing, well, if he falls to you, you gotta take him. You have to take him, including John Harris. Not John on the suit. Appreciate you, my friend. But if he falls to you at 25, isn't there a reason? And I know good players fall. We've seen Randy Moss fall. We've seen a lot of really, really good players fall. But in this week of a wide receiver group, if he falls to you at 25, doesn't that kind of make you wonder? Like some people, like on one hand, what you're doing at 25 is probably different in the mindset than maybe what you'll do in the top 5, what you'll do in the top 10 even. But if he falls to you at 25, that's cool. But it's not like he has like some character concerns. It's not like he's incredibly slow. I know he ran the 4.5, and that's not something that the internet breaks over, but it wasn't terrible. So if he falls to you at 25, I think that's the other thing that needs to be taken into account, that there's a reason for that. And we can use a lot of examples of guys falling and it ended up being a good thing, but sometimes there's a reason why someone falls to you at 25. So I hear that and I kind of think, okay, well, that's cool, but this is one of the weakest wide receiver drafts that we've seen in damn near 8-9 years. You go to 2016, 2017. So he falls to you that far. Probably something to keep an eye on. I would say that if he does, then maybe we start to kind of unpack what that is and try to figure out if he really does like ball or not. It'll be interesting to see how that whole thing goes. I personally am not as fired up about him as a lot of people are. And quite frankly, I'm glad that the Texans don't really have to sit there and decide to take him early. Maybe there's an opportunity that will present itself to where they can make the pick, but I'm glad that it's not an early pick and an early decision that they would have to make and decision that they would be making. I feel like Ibuka right now has gone from the most polarizing guy to now McMillan. So we'll see how that whole thing goes. Best mom ever cup always here. It's big, man. It's a big cup. Massive cup. Wifey never uses it. So that's the McMillan thing. Other news today, and be sure to subscribe, be sure to like, right along for the best Texans coverage in the game. Other news today. Damn, Auburn's starting to tap the brakes off them. Need 20 more points from Auburn so I can cash out. 20 more points. Let's go. But the other news, Cam Skattebo has run his 40. And we don't know when Cam Skattebo is going to go. I would say round 3 would be the earliest. And he could be one of those guys who falls into day 3. I don't know about that. I think if you have extra picks, he might be someone you like. Workhorse back, always underestimated. I'm underestimating what Cam Skattebo can be in the league. I'm not as high on him as a lot of people. Quite frankly, there's some guys who just always get underestimated, and they always end up proving people wrong. He's one of those guys. So I'm underestimating the guy. But he ran a 4.65, which about what you would expect. Cam Skattebo. He's not a fast guy. Probably plays faster than he looks. Complete back, workhorse. Don't know how it'll look in the league, but he ran a 4.65. Cam Skattebo. So same draft stock. Draft stock doesn't plummet. He did about what you would expect. When would Skattebo make sense? To me, Skattebo makes sense if you miss out on the top tier running backs. And we're talking about Omarion Hampton, Trey Henderson. I won't even throw Genty in there because I don't think that's realistic. But Skattebo makes sense maybe in the 3rd round. Like if you miss out on those running backs, he can make sense. If you don't take a Hampton in the 1st round, that's another like kind of dark horse hipster pick that we're talking about, the possibility of that. That's when Skattebo makes sense. Probably about the third round at the earliest, and then maybe in the 4th. Depending on when that happens. Maybe someone takes him in the 2nd. And they just really like what he did and they like that makeup. It's a strong possibility. The Genty thing I do think is interesting. Because if the Texans do want to use their draft equity and they want to be really, really aggressive, let's say at 12, the Cowboys, and we'll talk about this in a second. But I think between the 12 to 15 range, there could be a scenario where maybe the Texans trade up for a Tyler Warren or a Genty. If those guys fall, something that we're not really talking about. We're talking about receiver. We're talking about Golden. I'm starting to feel like Golden's going like in the 15 range. But like if Genty falls, and there's a possibility he may not, but if he fell, maybe the Texans just completely break the internet and they trade up for Genty with like Miami at 13 or something like that. We'll get into the scenarios, the trade scenarios, what to look for the Texans right now. What do we need to watch for? What are we looking for? And I think what you're cheering for right now, if you're a Texans fan, you want 2 quarterbacks to go in front of you. And if 3 do, that's great. Now, if you're in a situation at 25 where someone falls in love with Jackson Dart and maybe you can trade back, that's great. But if 3 quarterbacks go, that basically means you're sitting at the clock at 22 because those are 3 picks that you weren't even going to consider. Like there's a 0% chance the Texans take a quarterback. So if quarterbacks go, that's awesome. Almost make a case with tackles because unless you're talking about Kelvin Banks, but there's a couple tackles that will go early. It's just not even realistic. So you just kind of chalk that up. Corners. Every time a corner goes, you should feel very fortunate if you're a Texans fan because the corners, you're not considering that. You have 2 of the best young corners in the game. You just paid one, the other one you drafted last year. So if a few corners can go, that's great. You can get a combination of 5, 6 QBs and cornerbacks. That's great. That's what you want. You want people to be drafting positions that you're not even considering. So that's what you want to keep an eye on. Now, where do things get interesting in the draft? Where do they get interesting? Holton Newburn says McMillan is a pipe dream, side set on Abuka, Jaden Higgins if all else fails. It's not a pipe dream if you're going to trade up, and it's not a pipe dream if he falls. Someone's going to fall in the draft. So it's not. I don't think it's a pipe dream, assuming that they knowing that they have draft equity and knowing that they could trade up. Which is why we kind of look at this and we look at these scenarios and we kind of play them out a little bit. So I think the interesting part of the draft as a whole, and this is going to be interesting not just for the Texans, but this is really going to be interesting for the rest of the league. 2 very polarizing NFL franchises that always kind of have like the feeling of wild cards where wacky ass stuff can happen. And one that Texans fans probably care about more than most, Jacksonville, which is the number one thing to watch for here is 5, 6, and 7. I think this is when the draft can get really, really interesting. 5, 6, and 7. That little trio of picks where you have the Jags at 5, you have the Raiders, and then you have the Jets. And there's a possibility that the Jags or the Jets could take Tyler Warren. That could happen. We could easily see a scenario where that happens and Tyler Warren goes. Could happen. There's been talk about perhaps Genty going to the Raiders. Who knows? They're definitely not taking Tyler Warren. Maybe these teams go offensive line. Maybe they're going edge. But that is definitely an area to look for. It's not necessarily an area where we would see a scenario where the Texans would trade up or down. That's not happening. But the Jags, Raiders, and Jets, that is what to watch for, number 1. Then you look at Dallas, and I think Dallas is interesting as well. And depending on what happens at 5, 6, or 7, Dallas is interesting, and you want to watch Dallas because right now the Cowboys have a lot of needs, but the 2 most popular needs that you hear about the possibility of them taking Genty, and then they also need another wide receiver with CeeDee Lamb. Like their wide receiver situations have kind of fallen apart with Gallup. He's gone. He ended up getting hurt and being run out. Brandon Cooks, that trade went bad. The Easterby disciple. So they might need a wide receiver. You might see Dallas be the first team to take a wide receiver, which in recent drafts kind of sounds far-fetched, but you could see a situation where Dallas takes a wide receiver. If you're a Texans fan, you probably want them to go corner because you don't want them to start the wide receiver run. You don't want teams to kind of feel that urgency in a draft where there appears to be only 3 guys that 100% warrant being selected in the first round. You don't want the Cowboys to start the run and create some urgency or some buzz. So maybe you hope that they take Barron from Texas to play corner, or maybe even hope that they take Genty. But if they end up taking McMillan or they take Golden, even if he's not the wide receiver that you like most for the Texans, it still increases the urgency, and other teams all of a sudden see that, and we often see runs and whatnot. So I think that's where it could get really crazy. And right after that, right after the Cowboys, and this is kind of a viewer guide type of thing that we're laying out before stuff intensifies again, and we really get into the draft talk. But there's something that happens right after the Cowboys draft at 12 that we need to also acknowledge. Before that, let's go to the soup again. Rich Boy Jay. You ain't never hate. Swarm. He says, would you rather take the best wide receiver, running back, or tight end in the draft? If I get to pick like the best of any of those, like that guy ends, like I get to pick between that. I mean, I would, if you told me that the Texans could get Genty, I would take Genty. If you told me they could get Tyler Warren, I would take Tyler Warren. If you're saying draft the best one available, I would probably say running back, because I think that the tight ends and wide receivers, there's a chance they're stripped at 25. But if you're talking about just trading up and getting that, like the pipe dream of all pipe dreams, and crazy stuff happens on the draft, the best running back and the best tight end, I think, are better than the best wide receiver in this draft. So that's where I would be there. The next thing to watch for, though, after Dallas at 12. So after Dallas at 12, damn, Auburn's putting it on them now. Good Lord. After Dallas at 12, like, let's pretend that the Cowboys take a wide receiver. So let's pretend that Dallas picks a wide receiver, Golden. Let's say they take Golden. And all of a sudden, if you're a Texans fan, you're like, oh, shit. Are they going to get McMillan? Are they going to get Ibuka? What are they going to do? There's perhaps opportunity at 13. And this is another thing to watch, the Dolphins at 13. Because think we know, don't know. That's kind of dangerous to think you know stuff heading into the draft. But we think that the Dolphins won't be in the wide receiver business. Now, Tyreek Hill's been kind of sketchy. Maybe they want to be proactive and draft a young receiver to have as like a safety net for Tyreek Hill. They also got Waddle, but you would assume Miami's not going wide receiver. So if the Cowboys go wide receiver at 12, maybe that's a place to trade up 12 spots. Don't know what the cost would be. I'm thinking at least your 2 and then probably a 3. I don't have the Jimmy chart in front of me, but that would be something to look out for at 13 if the Cowboys do start the wide receiver run. And if it's not the Texans, it might be somebody else that's a little bit closer that likes a wide receiver, because they know the deal with the Dolphins too. So that's something to keep an eye on. You could see a situation where 2 wide receivers get taken at 12 and 13, depending on what the Cowboys do and what they decide that they're going to do with 12. I agree. Miami likes skill position. Yeah. And we've seen, I mean, you can't have enough receivers. So if they love someone, then no. And they like fast guys too. What if they just take Golden and put him with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and decide they're just going to have a track meet? Who knows? But 12 and 13 in that range is really something to keep an eye on when it comes to the wide receiver. If you're someone who wants the Texans to take a wide receiver, you want the Cowboys to just go corner, and you don't want to even entertain the possibility of that happening. Then we go to 15. And this is where there's potentially an opportunity to trade up. Let's say that at 15, let's say the Texans want to trade 10 spots with the Atlanta Falcons. Now, people say, why the Atlanta Falcons? What are the Atlanta Falcons? What's their interest in trading? The Atlanta Falcons right now in this draft, they have 5 picks. Now, we know the Texans added some extra picks with the Tunsil trade. We also know they need a wide receiver. What if one of the tackles falls there? Like, what if they think that they can perhaps add a tackle there? Could the Texans trade with Atlanta, give them a couple more picks? I think most GMs, you want 7 picks in the draft. Like, that's the ideal scenario. You want 7 picks. Falcons only have 5. So 15 is a potential trade opportunity for the Texans. It's about 10 spots. It is 10 spots, not about. So that's something to keep a close eye on. So we have the Dallas run, we have the 5, 6, 7, and we have Atlanta at 15. Early viewing layout of the NFL draft here in the locker room. Then we go to 20. And I think 20 is really, really interesting because I don't know what Sean Payton is up to. I feel like it's possible he takes a first-round running back. I don't think he's going to take a receiver. They already brought Ingram in at tight end. Like, you knew they were going to address the tight end position in some way, shape, or form. They brought in Evan Ingram, who I think probably someone that Sean Payton gets excited about. But I'm just intrigued to see what Denver does 5 spots ahead of the Texans. And if the Texans are thinking about even drafting an Omarion Hampton or something like that, let's say that they realize that there's not a lot of strength at wide receiver. There's not a lot of strength at offensive line. They know that their running back room kind of lacks depth. They want to have multiple backs. And we've seen Caserio and Nico come from places where they kind of stockpile backs. The 49ers had a good run game. They traded basically a full draft for Christian McCaffrey, minus the first rounder. The Patriots had a number of running backs. They drafted Sony Michel in the first round. We heard D'Amico talk about running backs. Let's just pretend that the Texans are in the business of even entertaining the possibility of drafting a running back. They'll probably be nervous when Denver's on the clock. Something's something to watch for there at 20 is Denver. And they're also in the same tier as you. Like, if you talk about where the Texans are right now in the pecking order of the NFL / the AFC, Denver's kind of right there in the same ballpark as you. They're a playoff team, young quarterback, third year coach. They're kind of in that range. So naturally, you keep an eye on teams like that. So keep an eye. Maybe they could go receiver too. Who knows? Then there's the danger zone. And this is the most dangerous area for the Texans if you're talking about a wide receiver. And this is one of those damn shames. This is where you really get frustrated. There's potential like throw crap at your draft party, cuss, all that territory. If you are someone who thinks they want to take a wide receiver, and this is why the trade up thing might make sense. You're in a danger zone at 22 and 23, which is a few picks before you pick at 25. Because the Chargers offense sucked last year. They really only have one weapon that they trust catching the rock. Possibility that they could take a running back. They're another team that's kind of in the same tier as you, although you kicked their ass in the playoffs. The Chargers are a team to keep an eye on. And then you have the Packers. Now, some people will say the Packers are never going to take a wide receiver in the first round. Yeah, I mean, they've definitely neglected that position in the first round, and they've elected not to do that quite often. But they still need wide receivers. And maybe they like one of these guys. So that's a real danger zone. And that's why maybe you do entertain trading up with Miami and Atlanta. It's not really just about the wide receiver being drafted in that area. Possibility that these teams need wide receivers too. So that's a real danger zone in an area to keep at. Now, Pittsburgh is drafting at 21. They're drafting 21st in front of those teams. And they're kind of in the same tier as y'all are all in the same tier. I don't know that Pittsburgh considers the Texans or the Chargers more or less of a threat, but they're kind of in that tier. Maybe there's a trade up opportunity with Pittsburgh. Maybe there's someone they like and they decide that they're going to trade. And a lot of people say, well, why would you trade with someone in your division? There's actually an example in 2021, not in your division, but like that you're competing with in the pecking order of the AFC. But in 2021, the Dallas Cowboys actually wanted cornerbacks, but 3 cornerbacks went, and then they decided they wanted Micah Parsons, and they knew that right behind them, Philadelphia, or 2 spots behind them, Philadelphia wanted a wide receiver, and the Giants wanted a wide receiver right after them. So they decided to trade back 2 spots with Philadelphia, who hopped the Giants, and they drafted Devontae Smith. The Giants ended up trading back because they actually wanted Devontae Smith, but he wasn't there. And then the Cowboys took Micah Parsons. So the Cowboys ended up doing a pretty good job there. And I bring that up because right before the Texans pick, the Vikings are selecting right before them at number 24. And the Minnesota Vikings only have 3 picks. We said Atlanta only has 5. Minnesota only has 3. So if the Vikings really love someone, but it's not a wide receiver, let's say the opportunity presents itself to where Emeka Egbuka is there, and it feels like he's going to fall into your lap because you look at the Minnesota Vikings, which is naturally something you do whenever you're hoping someone falls to you. You look at the Minnesota Vikings and you say, oh, well, they got Addison and they got Jefferson. They're not taking a wide receiver. There's no way. Could be right. They probably need some offensive line. There's no doubt about that. They definitely need offensive line. But they also need picks because they only have 3. So in scenarios like this, if they really like somebody and the Texans really like somebody, sometimes you just throw them a 3rd, you throw them a 4th to trade up. And some people say, well, why would you trade 1 spot? You trade 1 spot to avoid someone else making the trade. So that might be another thing to kind of look at when it comes to possibilities of trades. Trading 1 spot with the Vikings, which sounds crazy, but it's better than getting hopped by 1 spot. I think the Texans were kind of in that situation with Dillard too, and the Eagles hopped them. Ended up being good, but they were in that situation. So those are kind of the money spots. The guys that we're mentioning, trade up, fall 2. The McMillan fall 2 possibility, it's exciting, but let's always remember and let's reemphasize that a lot of times there's a reason that guys fall to you. Sometimes you end up with a Randy Moss or an Aaron Rodgers or something like that. Sometimes you end up with a Will Levis or many other guys who have fallen. So let's make note of that. Let's watch some basketball. Appreciate everyone for coming through. Subscribe, like, right along. Downtime, baby. Enjoy the weekend, and always remember when it comes to this Texan stuff, we're all in it together. Appreciate y'all for coming through. What should the Texans do?
Won't stop. Yeah, we top 2 and we not too plugged in daily digital on YouTube. We got taste for days, opinions to give, we got takeaways. If it's up, then it's up. We number 1. You don't need to try your luck. Locker room.